which, if I recall, is one of those very meta things. Those are indeed controls. Common ones, even.
Hi there. Thank you very much for playing The Beginner's Guide.
Isn't it?
My name is Davey Reedon. I wrote The Stanley Parable, and while that game tells a pretty absurd story, today I'm going to tell you about a series of events that happened between 2008 and 2011. We're going to look at the games made by a friend of mine named Coda. Now, these games mean a lot to me. I met Coda in early 2009
Hopefully
at
this
a
isn't
time when I
echoing.
was really struggling with some personal stuff, and his work pointed me in a very powerful direction. I found it to be a good reference point for the kinds of creative works that I wanted to make. So just to start you off, this is, I think, the first game he ever made. It's a level for Counter-Strike. You can walk around here, by the way. And mostly it's just Coda learning the basics of building a 3D environment. But what I like is that even though he starts from the simple aesthetic of a desert town, he then scatters these colorful abstract blobs and impossible floating crates around the level. And of course, it destroys the illusion that this actually is a desert town, and instead this level becomes a kind of calling card from its creator. It's like a reminder that this video game was constructed by a real person. And it kind of makes you wonder, what was going through his head as he was building this? This is what I like about all of Coda's games. I mean, not that they're all fascinating as games, but that they are all going to give us access to their creator. I want us to see past the games themselves. I want to get to know who this human being really is. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. So, it's 2008, Coda starts making these games, and he never releases any of them. He doesn't put them onto the internet, he just makes them and then immediately abandons them, and they sit on his computer forever. And I think he really understood this image of himself as a recluse. At one point, he jokingly renamed his computer's recycling bin to Important Games Folder. So, you know, this was just how he worked. He tended to crank them out one after the other without even really pausing to try to understand what he had just made, until suddenly one day, he just stopped.
This is bugging me.
In 2011, that was it. He made his last game, and then he hasn't made another one since. And that's why I've taken this opportunity to gather all of his work together, is because I find his games powerful and interesting, and I'd like this collection to reach him, to maybe encourage him to start creating again. And if the people like you who play this also happen to find his work interesting, then I'm sure it'll just send that much stronger of a message of encouragement to Coda. So thanks for joining me on this. If you have a particular interpretation that I haven't mentioned here, or if you just need to get in touch, you can email me at daveyWreden@gmail.com. Okay, that's about it for introduction. Let's take a look at Coda's first proper game. As each game is loading, I'll show you the date that it was completed. This first one was made in November 2008.
So this is a very different vibe than I was expecting out of this. I think I was confusing it with something else.
Whisper machine active. Shift destruction imminent.
This game is called Escape from Whisper, and it's one of the more generic games you'll see from Coda.
Still very
You can
meta.
click to fire the gun.
Security call breached. Hostile alien life form inbound.
Already the lighting
It
kind
looks
of...
like this game was abandoned mid-development. For instance, you have this gun, which you'd think would indicate that there are supposed to be monsters or enemies somewhere, but then clearly there are no enemies anywhere. You can't even reload the gun when you run out of bullets. But ultimately we don't really know. Maybe Coda thought that actually it was complete the way that it is. And I think that we should talk about his games for what they are, rather than for what they're not.
Enemy force neutralized. Begin ship evacuation.
So So I'm feeling like this is very much.
I love how you can see the bottom of the universe from this room.
I read that Understanding Comic book and want to make the video game equivalent of it, which, like, I'm not against. I'm a little curious, like, how well paced is going to be.
Apparently, this space station has a labyrinth on it. Sure, I don't know. There's really no reason for it that I've ever been able to discern, so in the interest of time, I'm just gonna skip you on past it. Okay, this is the part that's interesting. The game has this narrative about the Whisper Machine and how it has to be turned off, and then you get to the engine room.
Oh, so that was a BS labyrinth, just pointing that out.
You there, in the engine room. You could save us all. That beam is powering the Whisper Machine. We could disrupt it by introducing a great enough heat signature. If your body could stop the beam.
Well, I got this guy in my party who's immune to lasers.
Could you do it? Could you give yourself?
Can I just have him do it? Oh no, it has to be like my story, apparently. Thanks, Bethesda.
Let me pause here for a second. What you just experienced, stepping into the beam and then dying, is probably what Coda had initially intended when he was developing this level. But when he first compiles and plays it, something goes wrong. There's a bug somewhere. And this is what happens instead.
That's not how that was actually laid
Causes him
out.
to start floating. And this is an important moment for him. Because yes, this is technically a glitch, but Coda identifies something human about it. Like how small it makes you feel in the face of this larger chaotic system. Or this floating could be the afterlife, a peaceful place, juxtaposed against all of the hysteria that you've just had to traverse. I don't even know. I have no idea what he was thinking, but what's clear is that after making this, something lodges itself in his brain. He wants to do more of these really weird and experimental designs. So he stops work on this and moves on to a stream of tiny little games that go in all sorts of directions.
Messed up shape for a
Let's
spaceship.
go ahead and take a look at the first game he made
Just gonna
after
say.
leaving this one behind. Yep, in this game you can only walk backwards.
Yeah, so far this is actually like a lot less. What does it mean
So
to be
it's a
playing
short
a
and
game?
relatively minimalist experiment combining motion and narrative.
If you
It is less advanced than the previous game, but actually it seems to be more focused, more complete. Code is trying to give it a unique voice rather than simply basing it on a pre-existing trope.
if you shoot the zombies, are you a violent person for real? But no, this is like actually more focused on like weird stuff that you what did it say? Weird stuff that you like do notice when actually working on game development. And like I can appreciate that. And this walking backwards thing is like
It's
weird
a
and
short little
artsy.
thought, it says what it wants to say, and then it ends. Didn't need anything more than that. Which to me is why it works, because it gets out quick. Okay, next one.
I am assuming that Coda here is fictional, though. Just call me cynical. I was getting one of those Slender Man games. That's a bit of momentum.
And that's it. Okay, the meaning of this game won't be clear just yet. Please be patient with me for a few more games, and I promise you'll see what makes it interesting. Oftentimes, Coda would put bizarre titles like this one at the start of his games. I wish I'd known him at the time that he was making these early games. He would really only talk to me about his work as he was making it. Once he stopped work on a game, like, that was it. It was dead to him. And I don't agree with that at all, but what are you gonna do?
Okay, so
Once you've been slowed to an absolute crawl, the door at the top of the stairs opens. So why, if Coda's not showing these games to anyone, why bother opening the door at all? Well, to show you, I'm modifying the game here so that when you press enter, it'll bring you back up to full speed so you can enter the door for yourself.
So the narration here is like decent, and I get the deal, but like, I'm trying to stream this. I want to talk over everything and explain what's going on.
A room that's warm and nice and filled with little ideas for games. Coda would often tell me that he didn't mind if people thought of him as cold or distant. He said that he knew that he was actually a vibrant and compassionate person, but that it takes time to really see that. It can be a very slow climb to get there.
I mean, that one exists. Yeah, I'm digging this, actually. Well, again, like... So the premise is that these are all, like, old, like, game builds. But, like, I don't know, the lighting feels, like, slightly out of touch with that. Or maybe not.
Well, this is new for Coda.
It was what,
It's an actual
2008
puzzle.
said?
Go ahead and see if you can solve it.
Kind of like swimmy movement somehow.
Don't forget that solution, because we're going to see this puzzle again soon. We're gonna see it a lot. So that seems to be it, right? You walk down a corridor, you solve a puzzle, you get to the end. Simple enough. Alright, now I'm going to modify the game again so that when you press enter, it'll remove all of the walls from this room. How about that? There was more to it than we had any way of knowing. I actually find it funny that this game comes after the Stairs game, since they essentially convey the opposite idea. So, in the Stairs game, a dull exterior concealed a rich interior. And then, in this level, a dull interior hides this fantastic outer world. Either way, I think that the point is the same, is that most of the time you don't get to know what you're missing, or even that you're missing anything. That's not your role as a player. So if your role here is not to understand,
Okay, so
then what is it?
if you were actually making games like this and not as part of a thing like this, that would be like the weirdest, most self-indulgent thing.
Aha. So this, combined with the entering game from earlier, tells us that Coda believes his games are connected somehow. It could even be that the Stairs game and the puzzle game are literally connected in between this and the entering game. There's a bigger picture that all of his games are meant to play a role in, some larger meaning that we won't be able to grasp until we've seen all of them. And once we have, we can step back, and start to understand what exactly that bigger picture is.
So I'm also curious how long this is. So I'm a little tempted to just like plow through it in one sitting if it's not like several hours. Also, this is reminding me, like, a while ago, I was sitting down with some people and just, like, watching a Let's Play of,
Let's talk about video game development for a second. Every video game runs on what's called an engine,
first.
which determines what the game can and cannot do. So in other words, the engine is a set of tools for game development. To make all of these games, Coda is using an engine called Source. Like all engines, Source has certain things that it does well, and it has certain things that it does poorly. One of the things that it does very well is boxy linear corridors. That's why so many of Coda's games are set in these large, flat, empty rooms, is just because he's working with what the engine does well.
Yeah, I gotta get down here and,
the tools available to the creator shape what kinds of creative
new
work
skin
they're
from
going
our
to
Screen
end up
2
making.
character.
You might consider paying attention to the architecture in Coda's games, to notice how they seem to stem from an engine that's very good at producing linear, boxy corridors.
I mean, Source can do other things. Yeah, as I was saying, like, freaking Justin Roiland, the, like, disgraced, Rick and Morty voice actor, did this VR game that, someone did a Let's Play of, and it's just like...
This prison, funny enough, in Coda's original design, the doors stayed shut for a full hour before letting you go. If you don't mind, I think we're gonna skip that. This is something that he and I used to argue about a lot. You know, whether a game ought to actually be playable, whether it means anything if no one can get through it. And I would always defend that, you know, all this work goes into the game, why not make it playable and accessible? And so we just got into heated arguments over it, and there was one time that after one of these conversations, he went home, and a day or two later, he sent me a zip file entitled Playable Games that was full of hundreds of individual games, each of which was just an empty box that you walked around in and nothing else. Believe me, I played every single one of those just to find out if there was like a gag hidden somewhere. There wasn't.
Alright, so you got a weird relationship with your friend. But anyway, as I was saying, yeah, did this VR game that, like... I don't want to say this reminds me of it because that's just rude, but it was brought to mind looking at the, like, small boxy environments. But the deal there is just, like, here, be in this tiny space... A horrible guy is screaming at you, who isn't funny and is trying to improv. Escape to that exact same situation, and it's like...
It's the puzzle again, with the exact same solution as the last time.
That feels like the sort of thing that Coda there would design.
There's still no clear indication of what makes this puzzle so special that Coda is going to return to it over and over. But I promise I'll share with you my interpretation very shortly.
I don't want a run button. But yeah, like I've met people who like design games to horribly torture people. We're gonna see one of those games later tonight if I get around to it. In fact, not with what I've met, but like
here, Coda begins
a
using
good example.
A kind of dialogue system that he fashioned out of the engine's chat capabilities. Use the 1, 2, 3 buttons on your keyboard to respond.
But yeah, I'm gonna have to play it next because like otherwise I'm gonna have this setup and then a punchline so far removed that you're not gonna get it. But like yeah, there's this idea of like screw the player of the game. I'm doing this for me and to prove how like smart I am and make a point about like no, sometimes you do have to like sit there for an hour. But again, like the formatting of this, of like, hey, some like weird pretentious guy made all these games, wasn't me. I'm reasonable. I'm not gonna make you deal with all this. Is like, that's an interesting little hook.
And so we make one last descent.
That said, though, like, I am really expecting this narrator to start talking about liminal spaces anytime now.
It's a lamppost. Okay, I can't tell you quite why, but for some reason, Coda fixates on this lamppost. It's going to appear at the end of every single one of his games from here on out. I'll tell you what I think. I think that up to this point, you know, he's been making really strange and abstract games with no clear purpose, and maybe you can only float around in that headspace for so long. Because now he wants something to
It actually would be hilarious to
He
just turn
wants
into
a
Half-Life
reference
halfway through, yeah.
He wants the work to be leading to something. He wants a destination, which is what this lamppost is. It's a destination.
Right, so I gotta get a running
We're gonna
start,
see it
hit
in
the top
work
of
as
it.
well. His games are just going to become a lot more cohesive, a lot more fully developed, with more of a clear idea behind them. And as we go, that idea will get clearer and clearer and clearer.
I don't know how much I'm going to spend on this tonight. Probably not too much more, but I am actually like digging this. But then it also feels like one of those things where it's like I could play through the whole thing and save you the trouble, but then like. Okay, time for some Dark Souls.
So first off, I'm sure you can deduce this, but this game is not connected to the internet. All of the notes that you're going to see have been written by Coda. This was actually the first game of his that I ever played. This was shortly after I met him at a weekend game jam in Sacramento, where I grew up. I saw him working on this very level, and it was just so different from anything that anyone else was doing. So right away I was like, I have to be friends with this person.
These are actually
In
like annoying to
retrospect, I
read
think
with,
I was
like
probably
right on
a
top
bit
of them
too
and they
pushy,
pop up.
Trying to get his attention. I was over enthusiastic, but he was very gracious about it and very patient with me. And I cooled off eventually. Feel free to skip over any of these notes if they're not doing anything for you. Nothing extra is going to happen if you read all of them. Either way, to me they convey a sense of loneliness. I see this person who's filled with thoughts and
Let's game it out.
and beliefs and has no way to express them except as scattered and unheard voices in a game that wasn't meant to be played.
Also, I'm waiting for there to be like
It's ironic,
just a
isn't it,
sudden
that in
swing in
playing
things.
this
It's
game
like
and seeing how alone Coda often felt, that we get to know him better and actually kind of connect with him. And I have to be honest with you, this idea is really seductive to me. That I could just play someone's game and see the voices in their head and get to know them better and have to do less of the messy in-person socializing. I could just get to know you through your work. I think this is why I always liked Coda's games so much, is because it felt like they let me have that connection. I felt as though he was inviting me personally into his world. And then I feel less lonely too.
Yeah, I just waiting for this to be like. So then Coda showed me this one game. I thought, you know, this is really boring and repetitive, and they call your other stuff. And then we went out and got beers, and one thing led to another. And anyway, we just wound up in the backseat of his car. It was a time. Just thought I'd share that with you. But yeah, I'm probably gonna put this away soon because, like I was saying, it's like this is interesting. I'm legitimately digging it. I'm hoping people are also enjoying it vicariously. But it's like there's certain games you probably shouldn't stream where it's just like, here's a very, very, very linear thing where like I'm just gonna tell you a story, and it's like if you watch someone stream that, you have no real incentive to like pick it up for yourself. And like the whole point of me doing this whole tour of my Steam library thing is like, hey, here's some stuff. Maybe, like me, you got these out of some bundle and never touched them. Let's see which of them, like, are worth maybe taking a look at. If I do a full playthrough of this, and it's like, well, that was, but then I got to look at it. So yeah, I think I am going to... Yeah, this is good enough. I don't want to, like, cut off mid-narration. Also, just curious. Just curious. Every game just put on my default, please. Anyway. Yeah, so that is a brief-ish look at the beginner's guide, which, yeah, it's not what I expected. It's kind of neat.